So this is going to be an example of a bit of the gameplay from a new game from Sapper Studios designed by James Buckley called Battlegroup Clash Baltics. It's set in a contemporary environment and models a potential conflict between Russia, the red, and the forces of NATO, in this instance taking part in Estonia, in the Baltics. Tactical level, land warfare, and as the designer states, it's intended as both a learning and training tool, with an appeal towards both professional and hobby gamers. This scenario is, and if I now just scroll, is the first of 5 scenarios, I think, that comes with the game. And it's the most straightforward of them. And as I'll come in a moment, it begins with the rather innovative order system. I'll explain what that means. Pre-generated. You don't have to play with the pre-generated order system, but I am going to, as I kind of get my head around the game, and I'll explain what that means. Now, this is a 5-turn scenario, and what I've already played is the first of those 5 turns, largely because it consists of, as you can see over here, the Russian forces moving in from the edge of the map, which is over there, and getting into position with the NATO forces over here. So there's not a lot of direct interaction or conflict in the first turn. So I thought I'd skip that and skip to the second turn. Let's just zoom in a little bit and take a look at the objectives for this scenario. I'm going to zoom in there and then just move the camera up here and draw your attention to this bridge here. The 2 sides begin effectively with the same main objective, which is to control that bridge. The Russians need to have controlled or crossed over north of the river via that bridge. The NATO forces to have held the bridge and prevented that incursion by the Russians. The implication being that in so doing, they have managed to blow the bridge and in the process slow the Russian advance. Both sides also, certainly in a face-to-face game, this is kind of in a way slightly more impactful role for a secondary objective. And although you will have a 50-50% sense of what your opponent's objective is, it does introduce an element of uncertainty about anticipating your opponent's moves. And it means that even if you fail to meet the primary objective, if you can meet your secondary objective, you can deny an overwhelming victory to your opponent. Now, in this instance, and if I just move down here, the secondary objective, and I rolled randomly for both of them. I mean, obviously, when I'm playing single-handed, it kind of rather removes the purpose. The secondary objective is to control Cindy, to have troop presence in this grid on the map here. Now, talking of the map, you'll have noticed that there are no hexes. Instead, the map is, and if I zoom in a little, nope, let me just come down a little closer, you will begin to see that the map has these grid lines. You can see them running up here and across as well. And for anybody who's done any ordnance survey map work, this will be kind of familiar. Each of the grids is 1,000 meters or a kilometer high and deep. And many of the orders will make reference to presence within a grid, and they're organized along an easting and northing kind of basis. So along the bottom and the top of the map, the grid references, and if I just come up here, you can see up here along here the grid number references. So for the sake of argument, coming along here, this is if we come up here, this point here is 21 east and it's 24 north. So grid E21 N24 is basically this grid here, east 21, north 24. And you can get a little bit more granular if you wish to, but I mean that does as a sort of simple explanation for now. Individual units, how are they organized? Well, again, let's take a look at some of these NATO units here. They're organized in, individual units are organized into task groups. So if we take a look at this task group over here, task group 3, that comprises these units here, and they are activated as a single task group when it's their turn to do so. And although they move individually, they are governed as a task group by shared orders, and I'm going to come to that in a moment. So let's look at how orders work. For each of the task groups, and let's for the time being stick with the Soviet task groups. I'm just going to move here and we can see some of them here. Not the Soviets, I beg your pardon, the Russians. The Russians in this scenario have 4 task groups of land units, and then they also have some drones and artillery. We're going to come to that also a bit later on. Each of those task groups, as I say, there are 4 Russian task groups, have their orders pre-established before the game starts in what is referred to as a sync matrix. And here is the Russian sync matrix. What you can see is down the left-hand side for each task group, they're listed there together with their point of entry on the map, and also along the top, the 5 turns, and within that grid, the instructions that task group must seek to, or the orders rather, that task group must seek to implement, whether in one turn or over a series of turns. So if we look at task group, and let's have a look down here. Let's have a look at this task group here, task group 2. And if we come back to the sync matrix, task group 2, their orders on the sync matrix said that they had to maneuver to grid square E23 N21. So within the first 2 turns, they have to get to grid square E23 N21, which happens to be E23 N21 here. So they come in from the edge of the map and they have 2 turns to make their way here. So as you can see, show you the edge of the map, turn 1, they've kind of made their way halfway there, and they now need in turn 2 to complete the journey. And of course, as they seek to meet those objectives, that's going to bring them into a much closer contact and almost inevitable conflict with their NATO opponents. So each of the task groups provided with their orders for the entire game beforehand. Now, there may well come points as the game progresses where it becomes quite clear that you are on a task-by-task group basis going to be unable to meet those objectives. In which case, at the start of every turn, there is an opportunity to rewrite those orders. Now, in so doing, you lose a turn, but you also generate some electronic warfare, or some electronic chatter, as it were, that within the electronic warfare phase is going to provide bonuses for your opponent, and we'll come to that as we play through a turn. Now, in the advanced game, I'm not playing it for this first turn. The Russian forces don't have the option to rewrite their orders if it looks like they're not going to be able to meet them. They simply have to plough on to the best of their ability to meet them, and if they don't meet them, then they continue on to their next set of orders wherever they happen to find themselves, effectively. So their doctrine is such that they will just simply plough on without any attempt to reform or reproduce a new set of orders dependent on the circumstances. But in this instance, I'm going to stick to, while I'm trying to get my head around the system, I'm going to stick to them applying and seeking to apply their orders as written. I'm going to assume that the Russians and their commanders on the ground do have some scope for initiative and decision making of their own. Right. What I'm not going to do is do any more describing of the rules. I'm simply going to work through the first turn a step at a time, and hopefully in the process the sequence of play and the structure of the game will begin to reveal itself. So let me move to the sequence of play on these very nice player aid charts. Here we have the sequence of play. I'm going to keep it off camera. And we look first of all at the command phase, which is skipped on turn 1. So first of all, the first stage is the rally phase, which is resolved simultaneously if we were playing contested. And each unit stack that has a suppressed or a disrupted marker has to take a rally test to recover that morale. As you take hits, you become suppressed or disrupted, and your effectiveness is lessened as a consequence. So if we just move the camera there, you will see up here in turn 1, this unit up here got hit with some artillery, off-map artillery, took some losses, in fact took 2 steps of losses, and was disrupted in the process. So, excuse me, that unit, an infantry unit, which you can see the other markers around it. Overwatch means that it's been set some orders that it is in basically in position for reactive fire, and which means it can act out of its turn when it's not activated in response to the actions of opposing units. It can reactive fire, so that's what Overwatch is. And you can see underneath it says shell scrapes, which means it's sort of dug in to a more defensible position, so it gains bonuses. That yellow triangle is its javelin rocket-propelled grenade. And you'll also notice, in fact, what I need to do at the start of this turn is flip all these task group markers over to show that every task group is can be activated this turn. So, and I actually also have to remove these moved markers, which were placed during last turn. They're removed also at the start. So I'm removing all the moved markers as well as flipping over the task group markers. There is a bonus defensively if you have moved, so it is important to track it as that takes place. So, the rally test. we need to roll equal to or less than the unit's troop quality. So let me just pick up this unit here. Let me just bring it up here. You can see, oh dear, how my camera works, not going to be very good. Oh, don't worry, that 5 there in the black, that is its troop quality. So we need 5 or less to pass on a 1d6. Modifiers is that there is a -2 to its troop quality because it is disrupted. There's a -2 on that purple disrupted marker. So its troop quality is now down to 3. If there was a friendly HQ within 250 meters, and to show you 250 meters is, if you think this is 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters, 250 meters is a quarter of that. So that shows you what 250 meters. So if we had an HQ within 250 meters of the unit, then it would get a bonus. And also, if there's no enemy FE or force element in line of sight, we get a +1. Now, line of sight, there are force elements in its line of sight. I'm not going to show you which one because it's just off the out of shot of the camera. There's a recce unit. Well, let me show you down here. This recce unit down here, this Russian recce unit here, let me come out, has line of sight to the unit itself here. Line of sight is obstructed, and this might be worth now showing how the map works and terrain on the map. As you'll see, there are no terrain hexes, but there is clearly terrain. We have some built-up areas, obviously, urban areas there, and we have wooded areas. And wooded areas, as you can perhaps see, we've got 2 examples of 2 different types of wooded area. We have this wooded area, which has a white outline, which means it is lightly wooded, or a kind of minor obstruction. And then you have this wooded area here with a black line outlining it, which, for want of a better word, is dense woodland. And that would block line of sight. However, line of sight can move through a light obstruction, can't move through 2 light obstructions. So 2 light obstructions in the way would block line of sight, but 1 is fine. And a recce unit has a line of sight, I'm just going to double check, I think of 4,000 meters. I'm just going to make sure I'm right about that. Yep, which have 4,000. Normal force elements have a line of sight of 3,000 meters, and so 1, 2. That's easily within the 4,000 meters of the recce line of sight. So, because there is enemy line of sight, enemy units in line of sight, no further benefit to the attempt to pass the morale test. So, troop quality of 5 dropped down to 3 because of the disruption marker. We need a 3 or better, or 3 or less rather, to pass that morale test. So let's just bring my you roll a 5, it fails, and as a result, I just need to double check whether as a result of that, whether it goes to suppression, whether it drops down to suppressed, or whether it stays at disrupted. if the stack passes the no, it just remains disrupted. If it passed, it would move to suppressed. If it was suppressed and passed, it would then just so that is going to remain disrupted, and the impact of being disrupted is that its movement allowance is reduced by 50%, and it cannot move towards an enemy force element in its line of sight, so it can't move towards danger. That is going to find itself slightly hampered. Okay, so that was the only rally attempt. There are no other units on the map that are being disrupted or suppressed. At this phase, we would also order new orders for any units that were unable to meet their existing orders, but as things stand, that is not an issue. We're still within the command phase, and we now come to the electronic warfare activity. Electronic warfare is very important. Certain actions taken by either side generates electronic noise, and the sorts of things that do that would be indirect fire, whether by artillery or mortar, which is generates even more noise if it's unsupported by a unmanned aerial support drone. You'd generate electronic transmissions if you offered new orders, or if you took certain supply actions, but we won't come to those. So there's a variety of actions that take place, but the one that is generally going to generate most is going to be the use of indirect fire. Now, in turn one, both sides used indirect fire, artillery or mortar fire, and both generated electronic transmissions. And when you do that, when your opponent generates an electronic transmission, you draw one of these TX markers. So this is the NATO TX marker, generated when the Russians used some artillery, the artillery that in fact caused this damage. So at that point, NATO drew this, and at this stage, in the EW activity phase, you flip it over, and you can see that's a 0. They range between 0 and 2. Meanwhile, the Russians, they intercepted a certain amount of electronic transmission, again because of some mortar fire by the NATO side. This is 1. So two things happen at this point. Each side takes a target marker. I'll show you what that looks like here. That matches that number. So obviously they're not going to draw one because there's a 0, but the Russians are going to draw a 1 that corresponds to the ETX marker, and that is a target marker, and that will give them a DRM at any point that they can use on a die roll in the turn ahead. What it models is that the noise generated by NATO and that got intercepted has given the Russians a certain amount of battlefield intelligence, and that advantage is reflected in this dice roll modifier. So I'm going to place that off to the side that the Russians can use, and then these are discarded. Now both sides are going to draw what is referred to as an electronic warfare chit. There's a handful of these in the game, not many, and each draws 1. Again, if I was playing in the advanced mode, the Russians were going to benefit. They would be able to draw 2 and they would keep 1. So I'm drawing this one for the NATO side, and I'm going to draw this one for the Russians. I'll show you what they represent. As you can see, both of them are double-sided. So let's take a look at the NATO side. So NATO, I'll tell you, it might be even easier if I just do this. Oops. So NATO, that one says UAS coordination. They can hold that, and it means that any UAS, and we're going to come to those in a moment, but basically any unmanned aerial support drone with line of sight to its target gets a +4 to indirect fire, artillery or mortar. So that's really quite powerful. So you can hold on to that to use that when chosen. Or you can choose to play it immediately, which is the pink side. UAS spoofing, roll a 1d6, and on a 4 to 6, enemy UASs have no line of sight this turn. And that, again, that could cause some pretty bad effects for your opponent, because it means that when they try indirect fire, it won't benefit from the UAS line of sight, and it's going to generate quite a lot of additional electronic warfare transmissions. So I've got to decide whether I'm going to use that immediately. There's a 50% chance it provides as its bonus, or whether I'm just going to take the +4 guaranteed, and I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to hold on to that because I don't want. I think I'm going to need everything as NATO, and I don't want to risk rolling a 1 to 3. So for the Russians, the one they can hold it, comm secure. They roll a 1d6, and on a 1 to 3, they discard an ETX marker. And on a 4 to 6, discard 2 ETX markers. So their opponent will, NATO will have to. So that means that the noise they generate is nullified, or immediately all enemy FEs, force elements, only move at 75% of the maximum distance this turn. Well, because NATO are in a kind of defensive position in this scenario, I don't think they're going to be doing a lot of moving anyway, so I don't think that's actually going to affect them. So I think the Russians are going to hold on to this one, and they will use that at a certain point. The final stage of the EW activity step is that if a side has a higher total ETX value, it draws a second chit. So if you remember, the Russians got their 1. So because they interrupted more, they're going to get a chance to draw a second of these tokens. So that's really quite powerful for them. And off they've drawn Intel Intercept. So they could immediately become the initiative side. Well, I think they already are the initiative side, but we're going to check that at a moment. Or enemy UAS cannot draw a line of sight to selected FE or stack this turn. Yeah, so I think they're going to do local jamming, and that's going to cause quite a lot of problems for NATO and their use of UAS, which cannot draw a line of sight. So the Russians have had quite a result, I would say, in terms of what they've managed to secure in the electronic warfare phase, and it's going to cause a few problems for NATO. So that's the end of the command phase. Come back a little bit later on for the execution phase, which is where the meat of the game takes place. Though just before then, and I almost forgot, with this second chit, that of course has immediate. So what it effectively means is that I assign that to a stack, a Russian stack that's on the map already, and it means that enemy drones cannot draw a line of sight to that particular stack. So it's local jamming. It is hidden in effect. What I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it to this group here, this stack here. The reason being that within it, it's got, you can see that it's got its tactical HQ. Now, worth pointing out at this point, and this is quite useful. This here is some mechanized infantry, and you see that T to the left in the purple, the yellow T in the purple box. That means it's a tracked unit, which means that other units can be mounted or embedded within it. And so if you look, we have this tactical HQ section embedded within it, and then also mounted on top of it this infantry unit together with the RPG that it's carrying. So this stack here has a mounted infantry unit, an embedded HQ, and the tracked unit itself with its stabber, and that, because of the presence of the HQ, is quite important. I want to protect as much as I can. So the local jamming of that from that unit is going to provide it with a bit of extra protection from being spotted by a UAS, should it be in the vicinity. With that, because that had to be done immediately, it's not one of the ones that you hold. The phase does come to an end.